is that Muslims are a serious subject of inquiry. And a serious subject of inquiry requires effort. It requires painstaking exercise to go to the villages, go to the towns, go to the cities and find out about their life. And that kind of work was not there. What we in sociology call empirical research was just not there. So I decided that I would do that kind of work. And therefore most of my writings actually were concerned with that. A factual, empirical, informed view of the community and its problems.
Hello friends, my name is Abhay Kumar, and today well-known eminent political sociologist and former professor of JNU, Imtiaz Ahmad Sahab is with me. You know him very well. His scholarly work is quoted worldwide. And in India, if you are doing any research related to minorities, the question of social stratification among Muslims, and the questions of nation and partisan, and the identity of the religious community, Imtiaz Ahmad is indispensable scholar. He is quoted, he is supported, he is criticized, and his theory has influenced large number of scholars. I am also one of them who has studied, read his work and also listened to him several times in Jamia and also JNU. And the good thing about Professor Imtiaz Ahmad is that when I was talking to him right now, he is very much concerned about the rise of Hindu right. But at the same time, in the same breath, he has said that the way a certain section on social media from a minority community is responding to Hindutva challenge is also not good. So his criticism of Mediterranean culture and also Hindu nationalism is also going along with the internal critique. Sir, am I right?
Well, that's quite all right. It's okay. I will accept what you said.
Sir, to summarize your vast scholarship is very difficult, but I tried my best to summarize it.
Well, the point is that I started working on Muslims at a time when there was a whole lot of writing. Much of it was imaginary, and much of it was also intuitive. People just thought they would write about Muslims because they are Muslims, so they know Muslims and they can write about it. Or if it was a non-Muslim writer, he thought, well, I know Muslims, I can write about it. So one of the points that I made at that time and which I pursued all through my life is that Muslims are a serious subject of inquiry. And a serious subject of inquiry requires effort. It requires painstaking exercise to go to the villages, go to the towns, go to the cities and find out about their life. And that kind of work was not there. What we in sociology call empirical research was just not there. So I decided that I would do that kind of work. And therefore most of my writings actually were concerned with that. A factual, empirical, informed view of the community and its problems.
The first lesson is that you cannot do away with empirical reality.
I personally feel that your grasp of the reality is lost if you are not grounded in empiricism.
So here sociologist Imtiaz Ahmad is very active. Field work is very important.
Field work is very important. Sitting at home in your armchair,
Yes.
if you start writing, you are writing rubbish.
Rubbish.
If you have gone and seen villages, I'll give you an instance which is interesting. I had been in America for several years, and then I came back, and one of the formulations I had was that Muslims are poor and disadvantaged and all that. So I was doing fieldwork in Kanpur, and I went into a tea shop and sat there, and I started talking to people about questions of poverty and deprivation and so on. As I finished my discussion there and came out of the shop, a gentleman came out and said, "Can I have a talk with you?" So I said, "Yes." He said, "I was listening to you. I have 4 factories, and I have been to Hajj several times. All my family members have been to Hajj. I make belts for the army, cloth belts, and I do business." What he was trying to point out was that all your story about poverty is all right, but after all, I am also there, who is doing so well. So unless you go to the field and you confront yourself with reality, you are likely to miss a whole lot of things. Impressionistic writing is no writing at all. In fact, empirically grounded reality is what a good writer should bring out.
Okay. So the first lesson for the social scientist, young scholar is that never miss the ground reality.
That's right. I quite agree with you.
And even if Professor Imtiaz Ahmad has gone out in Kanpur thinking that Muslims are poor, there will be a person who will come and ask you, look into your eyes and say, "No, I am not poor." So then you have to look at Muslims' question a bit differently.
Differently, very differently. In fact, that is my point. That if you look at the burden, of writing today, everybody talks of marginalization, of deprivation, of Muslims going down the hill. Yes, some Muslims have gone down the hill. But a whole lot of Muslims have not gone down the hill. They have exerted themselves. They have gone into handicraft business. The carpet makers of Bhadoi or the zari workers of Lucknow, they have found new opportunities. Even with globalization, Muslims have found new ways of earning. Muslims have found new ways of registering prosperity. And therefore, today, it would be a wrong statement to say Muslims are marginalized. Then you have to look at which Muslim is marginalized and which Muslim is not marginalized. Because not all Muslims are marginalized.
But sir, I will contest your view in this way, that if 90% of Muslims are marginalized, or maybe 95% of Muslims are marginalized, so should we pay sufficient attention to 5% rich people to dilute the larger picture
Firstly, it is not 5%. Artisans, craftsmen constitute about 70% of the Muslim population. So when you are talking about what mobility they have registered, you are not talking of 5%. You are talking of 75%. On the other hand, is the Muslim middle class, which is only 5%. That has declined rather than grown up. So the middle class today, when people are writing about Muslim marginalization, they are talking about middle class. They are not talking about Muslims in general. Whereas the general Muslims go to Maharashtra, go to Kerala, go to West Bengal, you will find that the artisanal craftsman people have registered mobility. Mobility through hard work, through new markets which have come up. They have exploited the new markets. They have been able to do that.
So you are saying that the story of the decline or maybe the fall or maybe what should I say, the relative marginalization of the middle class among the Muslim is presented as the decline of the Muslims community as a whole.
Exactly. You have correctly grasped it. My point is, that's one question that I think is important, is that a very substantial section of the Muslims have done very well. And they have had advantages. The state patronage may not have gone to them, but they have advantage. They don't pay GST. They don't pay, various taxes.
Okay.
Because the business they are engaged in is not taxable.
Okay. So they are in informal sector doing well according to you.
Very well.
So this has linked to your larger argument that don't go to field or don't write anything with preconceived mind. Be always ready to accept the ground reality.
Absolutely.
So the first lesson as a social scientist, as a scholar, we should remember.
That is my point, is that yes, that's one question, that not all Muslims have declined, not all Muslims have prospered. Some have prospered, some have declined. I don't know how much time you...
No, you continue, sir, you continue.
But I'll give you one instance. In the 60s, the Muslim aristocratic class in UP experienced a decline. Because their only wealth was landed wealth. And with the Midari abolition, that went away. So they declined. In the meantime, the artisanal classes had come up. So whereas earlier, it was the aristocrat who had the car.
Okay.
Now, in fact, the weaver had the car.
Achha, theek hai.
And therefore, if a marriage party had to go in a car, if the bridegroom had to be taken in a car, the car was not there with the aristocrat anymore. It was with the Ansari. And therefore, the aristocrat would go to the Ansari and say, if you give me the car, our barat can go. You know, this total inversion of the social stratification system that occurred in the 60s and the 70s is something that people have not noted.
But sir, there is also such a committee report which says that Muslims has become...
That brings me to another question.
Okay.
There is another dimension to it. You see, when we talk of Muslim marginalization, we always presume that this marginalization began with independence. When the Indian government came into power, then the marginalization.
Hindu government come to power.
That's right. The Hindu government came into power, the marginalization began. My contention is, let us look at the pre-independence period.
Okay, sir. I have also done my MPhil on that.
Yeah.
Decline of Muslim backwardness.
You know, Hunter Commission was talking about Bengal. And he said that Muslims don't go in for education, Muslims are poor, Muslims are backward. And that has become that every Muslim middle class person accepts as the starting point. But were Muslims not marginalized prior to the coming of the British? Were they not marginalized in the medieval period? Because if they were converted from lower castes, and the empire was not there to uplift them, they had to fend for themselves. Therefore, marginalization existed even before. There was marginalization. At that point, there is a marginalization in the pre-British period. That continued during the British period. Hunter Commission, when it carried out its work in 1882, it said, yes, they are marginalized. Now, communities don't become rich suddenly. It depends upon the kind of asset structure that you have. Unfortunately, Muslims started with a bad asset structure, even in pre-British India. And because the asset structure was weak, that lack of assets reflects itself today.
Asset structure, what do you mean by that, sir?
Asset structure means the resources. You had no capitalists. Capital formation had not taken place. Agriculture was the mainstay. Most of the Muslims were handicrafts people, artisans and craftsmen. So, today if you say that there is Tata and there is Ambani, why there is no Muhammad? Then one Premji is there. Because he had the asset. He could compete.
But sir, as a student of history, I know that till 1947, the representation of Muslim in jobs were very good compared to the situation today. For example, in Uttar Pradesh, they were in large number in police also, in civil servant.
You see, it's like this. Muslims had a lead. In Uttar Pradesh, Muslims had a lead in education over the Hindus. So they were more educated. And they had therefore better access to jobs. After independence, the Muslim class either migrated to Pakistan or declined here. I don't know what, I know so many families whose sons did not go for education even though the tradition of education existed.
But sir, I read the book of Umar Khalidi.
But Umar Khalidi is trying to prove the theory of the middle class.
Umar Khalidi is basically quoting several letters by politicians and the officers post-independence who were deliberately giving instruction that people with nationalist credential should be given preference in job, which means that Muslims should be excluded. So you should also accept the fact.
I am not questioning the exclusion part of it. There were certain sectors of the government, for example, defense, for example, home, where Muslims were deliberately kept out. But a general exclusion, I mean, they were probably able to go in for other jobs. So Muslim representation declined not only because discrimination was there, it declined also because Muslims had experienced a decline in education. They were not going in for education immediately after partition. Why they were not going? Loss of nerves or whatever you call it. They thought now we will not get jobs there, for why waste money and time?
But primary education, particularly those in Muslim areas, and also schools which should have taught education in Urdu medium, they were also not made available to Muslims community. So you cannot blame the community fully for their Muslim backwardness.
No, I'm not blaming anybody.
Okay.
I am merely trying to analyze.
Okay.
And my contention is that the tradition of education was weak among Muslims because of inheritance, because of asset structure, because most of them were artisans and craftsmen before conversion. They continued to be artisans, craftsmen after that, and therefore their progress was slow. Muslims who were in aristocratic position in UP and many parts of Bihar, who were financially very well off, landed aristocracy, they survived. They continued to prosper. But there also, after the Zamindari abolition, those who were absentee landlords lost their land. Those who were entrenched into the land survived.
Okay, sir. So independence and freedom of the country,
You know,
is thing of the past. I think 70 or 80 years have passed since we achieved independence. Partitions happened. Pakistan was created as a separate nation state. So as a sociologist, as a scholar, you have seen post-independence India with your own eyes, and you have written about it, you have read it, and we know it at this moment that the people who are sitting in the power, the so-called nationalist forces, they have their agenda to start abusing, to start targeting Muslim from the morning till they go to sleep. And you have told me, I think some time back, that Muslims have forgotten partition, but it is those Hindutva forces who are raking up the horror of partitions. So please elaborate these points, sir.
I want to make series of points.
Okay.
Firstly, by any means, partition was a bad experience. It was a bad experience for the Muslims. It was a bad experience for the Hindus. Now, in 1960, when Professor Mujib wrote his classic book on the Indian Muslims, I reviewed that book. And I said that it is remarkable that he has not assigned any importance to partition.
Okay.
Because he doesn't talk about partition at all.
So in 1960s,
1960.
almost 10 years or 13 years after the partition, here is a scholar who is willing to bury the horror of partition.
So he did.
Okay.
And I asked him, I wrote a review and it was published. And after that we had some correspondence. And in the correspondence he says, you will see that soon enough partition will be behind us.
Okay.
So fortunately or unfortunately, what has happened is that the new generation of Muslims that has come up is not carrying the burden of partition on his shoulder. He doesn't bother about partition. He doesn't look to going to Pakistan. He would not go to Pakistan. He resents that somebody should suggest that you go to Pakistan. But it is the right-wing Hindu forces that are saying go to Pakistan. Therefore, while the Muslim has forgotten partition, the Hindus haven't. Particularly the right-wing Hindus have not forgotten. And the crux of the matter is that today public discourse has got caught into Hindu-Muslim as if nothing exists, as if no other problem exists in India except Hindu Muslim. That's one point I want to make. I want to make another point. You see, if you look at India's minority policy, I think we are performing very well. As Sayyid Naqvi has said in his book, India is a paradise for Muslims. But leave aside that. The fact of the matter is that the Government of India policy on minorities was so good that it was better than Europe and many other countries of the world. No compulsion. We will give you time, you undergo social change. If you come to us, we will enact a law for you, but we will not tell you. Uniform civil code was kept aside. No. And by and large, the state policy was benign. The state public policy was benign. Basically, allowing minorities to grow and change without compulsion. Since 2014, that policy has been abundant. So the targeting part of it is actually a targeting part that comes about with this as to create a Hindu Rashtra. Because then you have to have an enemy. And who is the natural enemy? The Muslim is the natural enemy. Therefore, the targeting, you have to make a distinction between marginalization that existed prior to 2014 and the excessive targeting process that has taken place after that.
But sir, Hindutva forces are making this argument that it is the secular forces who are responsible for the backwardness of the Muslims. We are...
No. The point is, they may say anything, but they are pushing Muslims back into their pigeonholes. Muslims were slowly changing, transforming, progressing. The Hindutva forces have pushed them back. What has happened as a result of the hijab controversy? Muslims, women were coming out, going in for education. Suddenly, you have pushed them back into their pigeonhole. Suddenly they become conscious of their identity. And identity is linked with hijab. As if hijab is the defining criteria for identity, which is absolutely ridiculous. But the right-wing Hindu forces have forced them to take that posture. And that is unfortunate because such progressive processes that were going on for the 40 years or 60 years suddenly became arrested. I think you must recognize this, that that today's Muslim is far more conservative than Muslims of 20 years before. He is more concerned with identity than before. He is more preoccupied with discrimination than before.
So for this, you think that Muslims should also be blamed? No. Muslims, according to you, Muslims are more conservative today than they were.
I think what has happened, I would not make a statement like that.
Okay.
I would qualify that statement and say, as a result of the onslaught of the right-wing forces, elements of conservatism and rigidity have grown.
Okay.
That is how I...
Okay. Sir, I have read the work of Shabnam Tezani and other scholars who are basically talking about Constituent Assembly debate. and their argument is that at the time when constitutions was being made, at that time reservations or a strong affirmative policies for the minorities were being discussed. But when the constitutions was finally adopted, affirmative actions, reservations, these were only given to caste based identity groups, and Muslims were given nothing as far as jobs and reservations are concerned. In British time, we had reservations for Muslims, let's say in job, there was separate electorate. So, do you think that the secular party should have made some very special protective measures for the Muslims community and other religious communities as far as jobs are concerned, rather than just thinking that giving religious freedom and giving individual freedom are not enough? And you have to also keep in mind that the Dalit Muslims were also excluded from the scheduled caste list at the time of Jawaharlal Nehru.
See,
your comment, sir?
you have a big problem there. The Constituent Assembly was constituted by a group of people, some of whom were very progressive, and some of them, I have pursued the Constituent Assembly debates myself. People like Shah, there were so many conservative Hindus in the Constituent Assembly, who, if allowed, would have made India a Hindu Rashtra. Right then. It was very difficult for Nehru to carry forward this notion, and a compromise was arrived at. And the compromise was that you will have the freedom of religion to practice, you will have minority rights, but you will not insist on reserved seats in parliament. You will not ask for reservation. This is the compromise that was made. Now,
was it correct? Are you happy?
I personally feel it was correct, and I maintain that.
Despite the fact that in 2020 you have only 2 to 3% Muslims in higher education and civil services, giving.
I think I'll make 2 points.
Okay.
Permit me to state.
No, please continue, sir.
First, a reservation is something that is not a panacea for social uplift.
But it has done wonders for the marginalized community.
Let me complete. But in the case of Dalits, the reservation was provided on 4 criteria. It was the lowest community. It was internally homogeneous. It had poor resources at its command. And it was therefore excluded. Now, Muslims were not excluded.
But today, as far as statistics is concerned, the representation of Muslims in higher education is, I think, worse than Dalits.
You see, the point I am making is, therefore, reservation is provided for the scheduled castes. Now, what has happened is that the demand for Muslim reservation has been made time and again. But when you introduce reservation, as has happened in the OBC case, when you introduce a reservation for an internally heterogeneous group, the fruits of reservation go to the well-off.
Sir, so any community is at the same time heterogeneous and homogeneous. It depends on how you look at.
Dalits are very homogeneous. is not there.
Sociologically speaking,
some
sir?
heterogeneity has come in after partition.
Okay.
But otherwise, they were homogeneous, totally landless, without education, denied Vedic learning. They could not come out in the streets during bright sunlight because their shadow will
pollute them.
Pollute.
Pollute caste Hindus.
You know?
Pollute caste Hindus.
There were pollution and all. So all this made the case of the Dalits very special. And I am glad that the government of India took that decision to give them reservation.
But why Dalit Muslims were...
No. But you must recognize that there are undercurrents of communalism and undercurrents of Hindu mentality even in the government. Because there are pressure groups. Govind Ballabh Pant, Tandon, Sampurnanand, they were all
K. Munshi.
K. Munshi, so many of them.
Rajendra Prasad.
Rajendra Prasad, they all wanted to make India a Hindu Rashtra. So when the independence came and the midnight came, there were puja going on at Rajendra Prasad's house. Even poor Nehru was not spared. Ash was applied to his head. So there was this tendency. Now, that pressure came in the way, so therefore if you look at the law doesn't say that Muslim Dalits will not be given admission, reservation.
Okay.
It's an executive order. And the executive order is a result of this lobbying against Muslim inclusion in the reserved category, because these leaders were worried about Hindus losing their numbers to Muslims and Christians. That's why. So it came as a result of that. You must recognize this, that one of the anxieties of the Hindu right wing throughout has been the loss of numbers.
Yes. And it has started since the colonial time.
So today even today, when 82% or more of the population is Hindu, the RSS says Hindus are in danger. What danger?
Hindu khatre mein hai.
Hindu khatre mein. Hindu are in danger. What danger? They are a majority. They are a very substantial majority. And yet the myth of Hindu khatre mein hai continues. So the point is that the exclusion took place from the Dalit Muslims, for the Dalit Muslims, because these people were afraid that if you allow reservation to Dalit Muslims, then Hindus will convert into Islam or Christianity. This is what the...
So do you see any possibility that one day Dalit Muslims will be...
I don't.
Will be given their
no,
rights?
I don't. Because the Ranganath Mishra Commission did recommend that Hindus, that Muslims and scheduled caste Christians should be given reservation. The state turned it down.
So,
and with the current state of affairs, when the RSS is talking about totally doing away with reservation, to allow reservation for scheduled caste, Dalits and Christians is out of the question.
Sir,
on the other hand, I always tell Muslims that if you accept the principle of caste, then your claim for reservation for Dalit Muslims will be stronger.
Which principle? You said that you tell Muslim that if you accept which
If you accept the principle of caste,
principle of caste.
that you have caste system,
Okay.
that you operate within a caste system. But the Muslim elite doesn't want that. They want reservation for the whole Muslim, which is a heterogeneous group with very poor and with very rich.
Okay, sir.
Now, if you introduce reservation in such a community, it is Mr. Premji's children who will get the reservation. The man at the bottom will still be deprived.
Sir, if I correctly remember, I have read your article, introduction, on social stratification among the caste, and if I am correct, and if I am going to summarize before you your paper, you have criticized M.N. Srinivas also in your paper, and you have said